because well done.
Thank you. It took a while. I think that was Zoom just taking a while to, I don't know what it was doing. Anyway, so it's recording now. So we're all good. So welcome, I guess, to our first evidence review or journal club hosted by ICASR. I'll be talking about generative AI use in systematic reviews. This will probably take about half an hour or so, I hope. I've timed it before, so half an hour from now. I'll go through and I'll just talk about a bunch of things, and then we'll have whatever time is left for discussion. But if you have thoughts, questions through me talking, please post them in the chat. So I plan on pausing about 3 times through kind of my discussion or presentation to answer any questions that are in the chat box. Because when I'm listening and thinking about things, I often forget my questions. So kind of if I pause and I say any questions, good chance, I generally, please, if you have a question and you're thinking of a question, pop it into the chat box as you think of it. And at a couple of strategic moments, or mainly when I'm kind of, need a drink, I'll stop and I'll answer all those questions that are there, and then I'll keep going. So I kind of do that about 3 times. Then we'll see how we go with discussion at the end. All the time left over, people can talk and come off mute, discuss things or ask questions. Could be difficult if everyone wants to talk about the same thing, but so we'll see how it goes. So that's about it for me talking and getting it all set up. So it'll mostly be me sharing screen from here. So most of this presentation, not all of it, but most of it is going to be based around a systematic review that we did here at Bond University, where we looked at, all the evidence to say whether generative AI is good or bad to help you conduct systematic reviews. So this was first presented last year based off evidence that we had collated and synthesized up until May 2024. We then updated it to January 2025 this year. And then it has now been accepted. So it will be hopefully, fingers crossed, out in research synthesis methods in about a month, I guess, hopefully in the next issue. So the final version will be published, unless they change their mind, which they might, I guess. So all of the things I'll be talking about here today will be published for you to check and read yourselves in more detail later, because I'm going to skim over a lot of the evidence and talk through it, but not go into huge detail because, it's the type of thing that is really easier to digest in an article, I think. So that's about it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through what the evidence for generative AI was like up to May 2024. Then I will talk through what the evidence is like now we've updated it to January 2025, because I thought it was quite interesting to see, I guess the differences in the evidence base between those 2 time points. And because, we had the 2 things, the 2 kind of analysis done, it was quite interesting to look at and compare, what 6 months of evidence and publications and research has done around generative AI. You can decide for yourselves what differences there are and whether they're good or bad differences. Which actually reminds me as well, finally, I'm probably going to say these are bad results quite a bit as I talk about this, or these are good results. I do not mean the studies that are in our systematic review are good and bad. Just want to make that very clear, because most of the studies are actually pretty good. So when I say they're bad results, what I mean is that they did a good study that showed that GenAI was bad. I just want to make that very clear, just on the off chances some of the authors of these papers here today, or some of them. These are pretty good, solid studies for the most part. So yes, good and bad, just as talking about the results they got. All right. So brief intro. I'm just going to put this up for a sec. So this is my very brief background. I'm just putting this up because I know there's some people on the call who do know me, but there's some who probably don't and might be wondering why they've come along and why, I'm running the first of these. Basically, I work at the Institute for Evidence-Based Healthcare at Bond. We do a lot of systematic reviews here. We specialize in them, and we do about 30 a year or so. I am a Cochrane Information Specialist and a Anne Cochrane author, and I was on the Cochrane Information Specialist Executive for 6 years. I was a founding member of the International Collaboration for the Automation of Systematic Reviews. I run the automation program here at Bond, so I design and build a lot of automation tools, and we will have a quick look at one at the very end, time permitting. And I also co-design 2-week systematic reviews where you do a full review in 2 weeks. That's kind of a bit of background about me. Basically just means I'm an old grey beard as we're doing this for a long time. I'm just going to start with this slide, which this is a screenshot from the Elicit website. Elicit is a GenAI tool that apparently can help you do systematic reviews. So I found this today and I popped it in because I thought this was a really good intro to where I feel some of these evidence claims are at the moment. Because apparently Elicit is really good, super fast and super cheap and will help you a lot. So these are claims, this is a screenshot. So these are claims they put on their website. And I had a look and I couldn't see any asterisks, which normally then refer you to some sort of paper or evaluations which back up their claims. And I still couldn't find any. So I kind of feel that it was interesting that a research software which is designed to help you do good research faster makes a bunch of claims but don't have good research to back up those claims. I just thought that was quite interesting because at the moment, I do feel we're still kind of in that area or in that phase of generative AI. Everyone's very excited about it and maybe is slightly overstating it. So this is a comment that we got back about our paper from someone. And I thought it was a very good comment because they do point out that at the moment, there is a culture of overestimating the performance of GenAI when it does stuff. And maybe it's a good idea to maybe sink into and look at the research around it a bit better. For example, this is one paper that we extracted. I think we finally excluded it in the end, but this is their results. So I'm going to leave it up for 15 to 20 seconds, just so everyone can kind of have a look at it. Because this highlighted, to me anyway, a lot of these weird claims going on and weird results in the way the results were written, because they screened 1,287 papers. Only 7% apparently were perfectly eligible. So these are their results that they published. So 7% were perfectly eligible. 7 and 18 considered suitable under the assumption that they were actually real. So in other words, it made up a bunch of studies that met the criteria. And then finally, though, after screening all of those 1,287, they actually only found one of the studies that was finally included in the review. And I thought it was interesting that that was the last thing they mentioned, and they talk up. And I just thought they talked up their results quite a bit here. Because really, as far as I can see, there were 25 studies there that were not eligible, that should have been excluded. They 18 fake studies or made up studies. So, and this is kind of particularly more so the stuff published earlier in 2024, late 2023, had this kind of feel of talking up performance. So that's where we were. So then we did a systematic review. So I'm going to talk quickly through the May 2024 systematic review. These were our eligibility criteria. Short version, it had to compare some sort of GenAI to humans. Had to report how good it was, so accuracy, error, and how fast it was, so time. We went across all research disciplines. We didn't just stick to medicine. So unfortunately, we had an excellent business academic on our team. So we incorporated business as well, but we didn't limit by any research discipline. We did, though, put in the proviso that it had to be published and peer-reviewed. We didn't want to be trawling through all the archives to find all the preprints, as you know, we were really only after good published peer review. So this is our search. We ran a search across all the databases you would think. 15 May 2024. Everything was done by 2 people independently and reviewed, full proper Prisma systematic review, compliance checks, methods done. These were our outcomes initially. I'll talk about how we changed how we reported, not extracted, but how we reported on the outcomes a bit later. But, you know, basically accuracy, error. How accurate was it? How many mistakes did it make? How fast was it? To assess risk of bias was a bit of a struggle. In the end, we decided that we would modify the Quatis 2 risk of bias tool. Quatis 2 is a good tool for doing diagnostic test accuracy risk of bias studies. We thought that was kind of close to GenAI accuracy study. So we modified Quatis 2 to do the risk of bias assessments. The important things was study selection. So were the review tasks or the reviews that they evaluated randomly selected, or were they just reviews that they had already done and had lying around? Whether or not the prompts were pre-specified was important, because quite often people would iteratively, be modifying their prompts as they went. It was also important to check whether the human comparison was good or bad, because if it's really bad human comparison, if the humans do a terrible job, it inflates the performance of the GenAI. Very important they were on the same topic. And finally, how applicable were the results of the evaluations? Did they do multiple review types across multiple disciplines, lots of different topics, etc.? So that was kind of our flowchart. Always like to put one in, because people always like to see one. So this was risk of bias at May 2024. So quite a bit of red, a little bit of green, a lot of yellow. These were the studies that we had included in May 2024. I think there's 14 studies there that we had. Don't try to read those results. I'll go through them in more detail later. But I thought it was interesting to see which ones were good. So these green ones here, these were the ones where the GenAI performed well enough that I would have think that it shows some promise. Maybe in the future, we can start to use these guys' algorithms or tools or whatever else they were doing all their prompts. So that was 3. 2 of them, results weren't great, but they were good enough for me to think, or us to think, maybe if you paired it with a human and did a lot of check-in, maybe you could use it. So again, not too bad, not great, but not too bad. Maybe, some more development time and it's usable. All of this red, these are all of the evaluations where they showed GenAI was, and at this point in time, you just wouldn't bother using it because its performance was so bad. So quite a lot. I want to highlight that because I'm doing the same thing a bit later when we update it, which is our update. So same databases, same, we modified the search slightly, improved the search slightly, and screened everything new. We did this 17 Jan 2025, so very new. So these were the outcomes, although the outcomes are the same, we just reported them differently. So these are pretty normal designing search things you measure: recall, precision, and number needed to read. Okay, I'm not going to go into lots of detail about it, mainly because I don't think too many people care too much. But as I say, you can have a look in more detail, fingers crossed, soon. So for screening, we measured correct includes, correct excludes, incorrect includes, incorrect excludes. And then we also batched errors together because we wanted to see what the overall error rate was. So how many actual mistakes did GenAI make? Data extraction was pretty similar: correct extraction, incorrect, and then an amalgamation of those 2 numbers. Same with risk of bias. Did it get it right? Did it get it wrong? And then we added, no, we just reported how many times it got it wrong as a percentage. So this is the risk of bias after we updated. So in fact, the risk of bias got worse in a lot of areas, particularly applicability and review selection. People were still generally just using reviews that they had lying around in their desks or that they had already done. And also GenAI, a lot of the prompts weren't predefined. Some were, and it was good, but a lot of them. So these are the results we got to after the update. So we had 19 studies we finally included, which met our eligibility criteria. But I didn't do it with the previous slide when I mentioned it, but I'm going to do it with this one. So there's 19 studies, but the 19 studies actually did 36 different tests. So this is multiple variants of prompts, for instance, or they used different GenAI models. So they use Claude and they use GPT, etc. So although the 19 studies, there are 36 tests in those studies. So from those studies, 3 of the 36 tests, again, were good enough that I think I would use those results, or I would use those tools or those prompts, or those algorithms. A little bit more yellow. So again, 8 from 36 showed enough promise that I would maybe use them in a little while after they've refined them and improved them a little bit. Add 25 out of 36. Pretty poor performance by the GenAI, basically. So I would not bother even testing it myself or looking at it or worrying about it. I would wait. Maybe something better will come along. Maybe there is something better already. They just haven't published or done an evaluation. But yeah, GenAI was not performing very well. Before I go into more details, though, I'll see if there's any. Oh, thanks, Tanisha's already answered it. We can't see any of the text. Oh, that's all right. You don't have to. You just needed to see how much red there was. So next. So these are the actual results when it did searching. So I know there are a few search experts on the call, I think, tonight. If you're wondering whether or not GenAI is going to take your job, not today, and probably not tomorrow either. So really, I think the best it got was 68% correct includes. So which is, 68. So what's that? 32% correct includes was the best it managed to get. So basically it dumped or lost 70% of the evidence, which, as you can imagine, is not great. I wouldn't have a job if I was only finding 30% of the evidence with my searches. So really searching, really bad. These guys did measure some time. This is the only study that did measure some time. Most of the others didn't. They actually only reported processing time for the ChatGPT to process, for instance. They didn't talk about any of the time, didn't track the time to set up prompts, load abstracts into ChatGPT, load PDFs into things. So it wasn't an actual comparison. So humans took 644 minutes, which I think is about 10 hours to do the searches. ChatGPT took 5 minutes, but I didn't find anything. So a 5-minute search, it finds nothing. To be honest, I can do a 1-minute search, it finds nothing. So, speed is really fairly irrelevant considering just how badly it performed at finding relevant studies. Screening for results tunnel abstract screening. Some of these did a bit better than others. Some of them were pretty solid, a lot really bad. Generally, wherever they included really well or got lots of correct include decisions, they made lots of bad incorrect exclude decisions and vice versa. So if they were really good at excluding papers, they're terrible and excluded relevant information. So the two were kind of opposite. Well, they could never get them both going too well. Couple of them did quite well, but most of them you either included well, excluded poorly, or included poorly and excluded well. I just want to talk a little bit or highlight the Gao, well, hopefully I'm pronouncing it right, the Gao paper. So they actually got correct includes 81%, correct excludes 90%, only 12% error rate. So their performance looks really good when you average it out across all of their 6 reviews that they tested it on. But these are the 6 reviews. And like as I said, this is good paper because they provide all this good evidence and stuff. So I can actually go and look at how it performed across each review. So it's excellent, easy to understand as well. So these green circles across the 6 reviews are where it made good decisions regarding include, exclude. These red circles are where it made really bad decisions regarding include, exclude. Top one, 31% it excluded 31% of the relevant studies. Here it excluded 40% of the relevant studies. So although when you average it out across studies, it seemed like it included and excluded really well. It actually only performed well on 4 from the 6 reviews. So 2 of the reviews were terrible, and it would have ruined the credibility of the reviews. And this is another thing that's quite important with using GenAI. It performs well sometimes, and it performs badly others, and it's very difficult to know when it's going to do that, because consistency is a real difficult thing to get. So in this case, 1/3 of the reviews it did were terrible, missing lots of evidence. It would have been awful. And I'll tell you what, I would not want to be doing 1/3 of my reviews to be wrong or incorrect. Full text screening, it did a bit better, surprisingly, and I still don't quite know why, and they didn't explain it. It did very well at screening other languages as full text. And also there was a couple more papers, Oami and Stratton, who actually did all right, or looked like they did all right. So Strachan GPT-4 Turbo got 1% errors, but then when you look under incorrectly excluded, so these are relevant studies, 8 of the 41 relevant studies were excluded. So again, 30% of the evidence is kicked out. So although sometimes it can look good, if you just take total error rates, it actually performed well, very poorly, because you can't be excluding 30% of relevant studies. So that's why, again, very important to look into some of the detail over its performance across multiple different metrics. Extraction and risk of bias, it did a bit better here. This is kind of where it seemed to perform better than in screening or searching. I think Gartner, it was a very good study. They actually managed to get only 4% errors, which is probably better than humans. That was using Claude 2, so that their algorithms or their processes work pretty well. Some of the others are awful, of course. Some of them pretty good. And then assessing risk of bias, although it looks like it did well, and this is the one difference in our published paper. There was one more paper we've got in for assessing risk of bias in the end, so we've actually got 3. And it, again, performed around the same level as TeraGi. They've got about 50% error rates, I think, not 40%, so it performed really badly. So the lay paper, it was assessing randomized trials, whereas TeraGi and the other paper, whose authors I've forgotten, they were assessing observational studies. So GenAI does well, at assessing risk of bias in trials, awful at assessing risk of bias in observational studies. So that's it for talking about our review and where we're at. So this is one final example I'm just going to mention. So this is a bit old now. So this has got commissioned, and it's got nothing to do with us. This was not us at all. This is a completely different group. I'm not even sure who they are. Basically, the Australian government commissioned a bit of a study on how well GenAI could summarize briefs, I guess, for ministers compared to humans. It's quite a good study. It's also there in Crikey, which is an Australian, very Australian word, but it's an Australian newspaper. It was pretty well written. So basically, they tested to see whether or not humans compared to GenAI would summarize and do good summaries, of complicated topics for, I'm assuming, ministers, because ministers don't like to read too much. So they used Llama 2 70B. 10 humans were given the same task. Reviewers were blinded as to where the summary came from, whether it was GenAI or humans. Overwhelmingly, they found that the human summaries were far superior to the AI summaries, which has surprised me because AI summarizing stuff is apparently something it's very good at. But it was 81% to 47%. And the reviewer feedback in the end was that they felt that AI actually made it longer. It took longer if you used AI to help with your summaries because of the amount of checking or fact checking you have to then do with a summary produced by generative AI. Now, this is 2024, so it's a bit old. So maybe it is performing better now, but I just thought that was quite an interesting study. So that's it for talking about that. So I think, so we will have time. So very shortly, I will demo where we're at with our generative AI stuff. But I just kind of wanted to mention one thing, this is a great example and a great exchange from LinkedIn from my colleague and good friend Farhad Shokrana about an excellent paper that was produced. And I think it summarizes really well where we're still at with generative AI performance at the moment in research and in systematic reviews. So this was a really good paper that looked at how good different deduplication automatic duplicators were across different studies, across different tools. So Covidence, our tool, Rayan, a couple of others, I can't remember, but a really good paper. And he posted, we waited so long for this. And we did, but finally someone did it. It was great. It was really good to know how these tools perform. Unfortunately, Rayan didn't perform very well, but Rayan got a bit shirty with him. So they posted a comeback message saying, you waited too long. Here's a 3-minute video that shows you why Rayan's really good. And I think his response, I think, perfectly summarizes my response to people talking about GenAI. Thank you for the video, but we really need to rely on peer-reviewed, independent, conducted, published, comparative evidence to help us guide us in choosing the right tool. I think it perfectly summarizes where we're at, and Farhad's a great guy, and I just think I just really like this example because it's just, really nails how important it is to have good evaluative evidence to guide us in our use of tools to do research. Systematic reviews in this case, but really any research. So I don't know if there's any questions yet. There might be a couple. So I think that's it for me talking about what the evidence is like and my opinions around the evidence and where it's at. In a minute or two, I will demo kind of where we're at with our development of generative AI and incorporating it into our tools. Just see if there's any quick questions to answer. So Mike Clark said, I can imagine producer software would say things are better now. Yes. You say anything about when the studies were done and whether there's a trend over time towards improvement. They do say that a lot, Mike. Yes, and I'm sure they're going to keep saying it. We did notice that the studies themselves were much better reported over time. So myself and my good friend and colleague Mark Jones and some of the other some of the rest of the authors did extract the newer studies that we picked up on our update, and we did find that they were better conducted and they were better reported. So the studies themselves were getting stronger and better. The performance didn't seem to be improving that much. It still seemed to be, pretty good at some stuff, pretty good at extracting some data from papers, pretty good at assessing risk of bias for some stuff, but overall, no. And we were quite surprised. But a lot of that overstatement and over-exaggeration of the research was not in the newer papers that we incorporated into our review during the update. So that was really nice. They were also written better, which was really nice. So Alex has asked on the specificity sensitivity slide, the SSRI review seemed to give very good results. Is there any reason for that in terms of sample size GenAI model used? I don't know which one you're talking about, but I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and reread it. All kind of merged into one, unfortunately. So I'd have to go back and look at the actual study again to know. I think, though, that the prompts used obviously can make a big difference. Also, the model used seems to make quite a big difference as well. Also, some of the tools you would use to pass PDFs, so some of them are really bad and some of them are good. So the PDF passes you use as well can make a big impact on the performance of reviews. Marie and T's asked the differences. Do you think that they have won the LLM used, training data used, topics used, experience with the authors conducting SRA themselves? Yes, I'm going to say yes to all four. I think all four of those things are really important. The models, I think, do perform better Some models are much better than others. Definitely some of the easier the training data, the better they perform as well. So as I say, they're doing trials is much easier than doing observational studies. I'm guessing the topics as well would make a big impact and a big difference. Intervention reviews, again, I'm assuming are easier than non-intervention reviews. I don't have had experience with the authors conducting SRs. I'm assuming that if there's good experienced systematic review authors helping to design the tools or helping to design the prompts, then the performance will definitely be much better. And I think that was, I don't know, I've mentioned Gartland a few times, but because I think they're actually quite a strong systematic review team or researchers. So I think maybe partly that might be part of the reason why they got good performance out of the GenAI stuff or algorithms they were using. Thank you, Farad. I was a bit worried because I knew you were coming. But as I say, I just love that. I just love that response so much that I just like to pop it in wherever I can. So Francesca's said, I've read some of these papers, description of dataset partitioning, which requires use for prompt development, few-shot learning, not using. Yes. All I can say is very, and I'd put an F confusing to go with the V, to be honest. VF confusing. Some of them are really, really hard to extract. Like, it took us a long time to extract some of these papers, even to figure out what they did and do the risk of bias. Again, more so the earlier stuff, there were some really good standouts, a few really good ones, but for the most part, particularly in the stuff we did up until May 2024, really hard to understand what the hell was going on. They were maybe well conducted, but really poor. So Mike's asked, thanks for the answer to time trends. So that we can minimize publication bias studies of AI. Definitely. Very good idea to always register a study beforehand. I normally put my stuff in OSF. We put our stuff in OSF, but maybe we need to go look at the SWA repository. Because OSF's okay, but yeah, something maybe a bit more like a study register would be good. So Jesus Jesus. Hopefully I got one of those right. What's the point of evaluating performance at a single time point if it may change over time? Can we assume performance will improve with future model updates? I think that that's an assumption that we can't make because we saw the performance was worse in some of the newer models and some of the older models. So I think we can't assume that it will get better over time. I think GenAI will get better, but we're not sure. I mean, I think there is a lot of value in evaluating performance at single time points. I just think maybe we need to evaluate it again in a year's time and see where we stand. 6 new messages. All right, I'm going to pause and I'll come back to answer the rest of the questions. So I do want to just demo where we're at. Because I'm not sure how many people showed up to see that, but I want to show it anyway. But I will come back and answer any more questions that are there. So, which is my final 3 slides. So I've preloaded a lot of this stuff here. So we do actually have a GenAI screening tool now that we're going to launch soon. Evaluated internally, and it seems to perform pretty well. So I'm going to live demo it now to give you guys an idea of where it's at. But I have to be very clear, we're kind of at the here's a cool video stage, but we do plan to evaluate it properly and publish over the next 6 to 9 months. So I'm going to screen for a systematic review that we did. This is a real systematic review, blue light therapy to treat acne. So I think it's that one. So this is our platform called Terra, or the Evidence Review Accelerator. I've put in some references. So I've got 557 references found by PubMed search. I'm going to go to our Mecha Screener tool and make sure it's charged up. So I'm going to load in those 557 citations. Hit continue. And so this is real, by the way. So we did do this. I mean, I've done it before now, but we didn't know what the results were going to be like when we very first did this. And this is the same stuff we used when we did it, the same studies, the same everything. So the inclusion criteria, people with acne. Intervention is blue light treatment. We don't put any comparators in, although you could if it was really important. But the outcome we're looking for is change or reduction in acne. The studies we're looking for randomized controlled trials. Then I'm going to hit continue, gives you a chance to view what you put in, your criteria, eligibility criteria. I'll hit finish and sit here with my breath held, hoping it doesn't crash.
That cyclone's slowing it down.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad I'm doing this today, not tomorrow. Could also be the Bond computers. But no, this is actually normal speed it runs at. So I'm pretty comfortable at the moment. Cool. All right. So it finishes screening. So then it will partition them out into undecided here. So these are 29 undecided. Reason why they're undecided is they have no abstract. So without an abstract, GenAI can't really do very much. So we just decided to go, the hell with it. We're not even going to try. You have to look through these ones with no abstract. You still need to manually look at these 29. So there's 125 includes, probably be better. We're going to reword some of this a bit. This will say possible includes because there's not 125 includes. There's actually only 10 in there. But these 125 are what GenAI says are possible includes. We have inclusion scores, inclusion ratings. So the 5s are the best, 3s are not so good. Then we have the excludes. That's 403 excludes. These are ones that score a 1 or a 2. So these 403 tool or the algorithm says these are out, definitely excludes, no need to check them. But we've built an interface to make sure you can check them. Again, this is very important. We don't want to do any black boxing. You can go have a look. And we always recommend you do have a look, especially when you're new to a tool, just to check to make sure it's actually working properly and not throwing out relevant. We're reasonably confident that it unlinks performance. And again, confident that it's consistent performance across various review types. And we have used it internally a little bit more. And it seems to perform pretty well. So, as I say, there are 10 included studies in our final blue light review. Those 10 are in these 125. I have checked. Well, not just now, of course, but I did check a bit earlier. So you can see 556 or 7, I think. There's plus one in there somewhere. 125 were AI includes. True includes were in those 10. So the 10 actual includes are in those results. You still have to screen 125 to get to your 10 manually, but it does offer some time saving. We're not sure how much, because of course it excludes the easier ones. The harder ones are the ones that it leaves for you to look at yourself. That's kind of where we're at. As I said, we're at the cool video stage. But we are hoping that with a bit of more use, and we are using it ourselves, we'll see how it performs. And we are recruiting at the moment internally. We've got quite a few recruits ready who are going to help us test it in a small randomized trial. But hopefully that will give us a good indicator of its consistent performance across multiple reviews and review types. So that's where we're at with our tool. So, so we think that it is there. We think that GenAI is coming. We do think that it will be useful. We're just not too sure yet which ones are good and which ones are bad. All right, so my apologies for getting off track, and I'll try my best. We're down to 8:46 p.m. here in Brisbane or Gold Coast. 14 more minutes officially. I'll do my best to go as fast as I can through what's left. Seems like ICASR workload tasks, widely varying results. Yes, they do. And again, the data sets are small, yes. We didn't really identify best practice workflows. No, it's because we weren't really looking for it. But we did identify when the paper's published, it comes out each of the individual papers. We've got risk of bias for each individual one. So you can actually see how each paper scored. So the ones with lots of green are the good ones. This would be my point. Off the top of my head, I can't remember which ones they are. How exhaustive would evaluation tools need to be to trust the system? Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know the answer. I would want to see more than one or more than five. But without a lot of funding, a lot of money, who knows? I think that it'll be like when we first launched automatic deduplication. People will start to use them cautiously, and over time, people will tell the developers, hopefully, where they went wrong, where they went right, and then you can tweak and modify algorithms based on user feedback until everyone is quite comfortable and confident. I think in 2 years' time, everyone will be using generative AI to help screen. And I think the good tools and the good algorithms, the good prompts will flow to the team. Did these studies compare the results of human abstract and full text decisions? What are your thoughts on LLMs for filtration should be? That's a good point, good question. I actually think that you should be comparing the screening for LLMs, title abstract versus title abstract, because I think it's unfair to expect the GenAI tools to be getting the perfect full text, perfect 10. I actually think you need to be comparing like with like. So title abstract, I think is where it's at, where it is useful, but you should be comparing title abstract versus human results, title abstract, GenAI results. Yeah, so Tanisha was one of the authors, by the way. Data extraction was brutal. Jose, human assessments reported after consensus reached by Zell on the line approach. Yes, that's a good point, and we do mention that. Most of them were comparing to 2 humans. So most of the time it was 1 Gen AI to 2 humans after consensus, which does, of course, is a bit unfair to the Gen AI. Some studies have LM voting to come to a joint conclusion. Yeah, there are. I'm not sure that the voting system works, but I have heard that. But yeah. I would be interested to see how it performs. I do know like one tool for sure off the top of my head that does that. One argues yes, one argues no, and one then decides which is correct, which is an interesting way of doing it. No, Francesca, you're not going crazy. We almost went crazy doing this review, though. That was how hard it was. Was this labeled dataset C? Oh. Is this equivalent to, yeah, so our screening tool is 0 shot. Yeah, so there's no learning at all. So it's just put in your PICO criteria. The LLM we use will just tell you. Yes, we get the same results every time. Same 125, 126, whatever it is. Every single time I do it, it's the same number, and the includes are in there. I'm assuming it's the same. I haven't gone through in great detail, but it's always 126 or 125, whatever the number was. So Mecha Screener is only for title abstract screening. We don't do any PDF parsing. We don't upload PDFs. That's just only title abstract. So you just upload references from, say, PubMed that have the title and the abstract. And we just do title abstract screening only. Give you what we think are the probables. You then manually screen the third or the quarter that are left, and you do full text screening yourself. We would like to look at full text screening and see how we go, but at the moment we're staying away from it because we have to build a PDF parser and upload things and store lots of information. And, we want to get title abstract screening right first. Will this Terra platform be a paid software? Yes, sort of. Terra is actually available right now. So terratools.com is open to the public for beta testing still. Hopefully beta testing will end soon. It'll be free and subscription. So the free version means you can create and run one project at a time. No worries. The paid version means you can create and run as many different projects as you like. With Mecha Screener, free version means you can screen 1,000 for free a month. And it will slowly rebuild and top back up over a month, back up to your 1,000. The subscription version, which will be 10 Australian dollars a month or 100 Australian dollars a year-ish, at least on launch, will allow you to screen 10,000 a month, basically. And it tops back up to 10,000 much faster. We'll also put in at some point a way to top it up manually yourself, where you go, I want to give me 1,000 for $10 or something. But at the moment, if you subscribe, you can do 10,000 a month. So if you're screening 10,000 a month, so that's 120,000 in a year. That's a lot of screening there. Francis, I was wondering where you identified discriminacy semi-automatic classification. Reporting effort costs screened. Sorry, I'm going to use the word pass. I'm hanging out with computer scientists too much. I don't actually understand the difference between semi-automatic classification system and the semi-automated classification system suggested to be used in papers. So I don't quite understand the question, sorry. Oh yeah, it's also getting quite late in Australia. It's like getting close to my bedtime. I'm not as young as I used to be. So it's approaching 9 p.m., which is quite late. But I think I'm going to stop there, and I don't want to open that up, but I think if anyone wants to come off mute and make a point or ask a question, please feel free to do so, because I'm going to stop sharing and stop. I'll even stop recording. No, I won't stop recording, but I'll stop sharing. Officially, we have 7 more minutes left to waffle or talk about whatever anyone would like to talk about. Or if you've had enough, you can just go to bed, which is what I'll be doing in about an hour.
Thanks, Justin. Belinda and I helped work on that paper, and we were just reminiscing about all the analyses that we did that didn't even make it into the paper because of the word limit. But yeah, you managed to pull a couple of them out for this presentation, and some of them quite insightful, like that Gao paper. So cheers for that.
Yeah, I think that Gao paper really is a great example of where things were at. So they might have improved, but where they were at with a lot of this stuff, it was very hit and miss. And importantly, you could not tell when it would be hit and miss, and there was no way to know except by checking each review anyway. So yeah, but yeah, you were right. There was a huge amount of data put out in those papers. Oh, yeah. I don't know that I'll be updating it again in a year. I'm not sure I could go through.
We still need a little bit more trauma therapy, don't we? Maybe every 2 or 3 years instead. And there's been the question of when the paper will come out. It's been accepted, but I don't know. God knows when the proofs will arrive.
Yeah, so it got accepted last week.
Yeah, we put in the revisions and it was accepted within 24 hours, and the editor said, wow,